Welcome to one of the most unsettling stories buried in the red clay of Georgia's forgotten past. A story of two sisters whose lives were bound by love, pride, and a secret that would stain their family name for generations. What you're about to hear isn't a ghost story. There are no spirits in this tale, no curses carved in stone. The horror here is purely human, born of obsession, envy, and the terrible choices people make when their hearts defy the rules of their time. In the summer of 1841, the Holloway plantation in Jefferson County stood like a monument to Southern grace, white columns, green fields, and quiet wealth. But behind those polished doors, something dark was stirring. The Holloway sisters, Eleanor and Clara, shared everything: a father's ambition, society's expectations, and a bond so close it blurred the line between devotion and rivalry. Yet that closeness would soon fracture, all because of a man who was never meant to be more than a servant in their household, Samuel Reed. For more than a century, the truth of what happened at the Holloway estate lay hidden beneath silence and fear. That silence finally cracked when a forgotten journal was discovered during a courthouse renovation. Its pages, written in a trembling feminine hand, revealed confessions no one was meant to read, a story of love that crossed every boundary and a betrayal that ended in blood. Tonight we open that journal together. We follow the whispers beneath the willow grove, where the past still lingers in the shadows, waiting to be heard. You're watching Grave of the Shadows. Subscribe for more stories where history's darkest secrets are finally unearthed, and tell us in the comments what you believe truly happened that summer. In the summer of 1841, Jefferson County rested beneath a sky heavy with heat and silence. Long stretches of cotton fields shimmered like silver under the noon sun, their stillness broken only by the slow rhythm of cicadas and the creak of wagon wheels on red earth. To passing travelers, the Holloway plantation appeared as a picture of Southern prosperity: sprawling land, marble fountains, and a grand white-columned mansion set high on the hill. Yet beneath its elegance, the soil held secrets, some whispered by those who labored in its fields, others confined to the marble rooms above. Judge Nathaniel Holloway, patriarch of the estate, was a man both admired and feared. A widower for nearly a decade, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to obedience. His reputation as a fair but unyielding magistrate had earned him influence across Georgia, and within his home, his word was law. His daughters, Eleanor and Clara, were his pride, two bright jewels in the hollow crown of a once powerful family line. Eleanor, the elder, had inherited her father's composure and intellect. Measured in speech and graceful in manner, she was often described by visitors as a woman born out of her time. Clara, 3 years younger, possessed a charm that turned heads wherever she went. Where Eleanor observed, Clara performed. Where one sought knowledge, the other chased delight. Together, they maintained the illusion of harmony, an image polished carefully for every guest who dined beneath the Holloway chandelier. But appearances in Jefferson County were fragile things. The war between image and truth simmered quietly beneath every plantation's polished floorboards. In a society built on wealth extracted from human bondage, reputation was as valuable as land, and just as easily lost. The Holloways understood that better than anyone. Servants spoke of the mansion's silence after dusk, when lamps were extinguished and only the whisper of the willows outside remained. Some said the house itself seemed to hold its breath, guarding the unspoken sorrows of its masters. No one could have guessed that before the year ended, those whispers would turn to cries, that the Holloway name, so respected in court and chapel alike, would become forever entwined with scandal, tragedy, and an act of betrayal that not even time could bury. Next came the event that changed everything: the arrival of a man whose presence would unravel them all. The Holloway mansion stood as a monument to Judge Nathaniel Holloway's power, a home of marble floors, tall mirrors, and portraits of solemn ancestors gazing down from gold frames. Inside those rooms, the rhythms of life moved with precision. Breakfast served at 8, lessons and correspondence before noon, and the judge's meticulous review of estate accounts each evening by lamplight. Everything was ordered, polished, predictable, until the summer that changed them all. Eleanor Holloway, at 23, embodied the poise expected of a Southern lady of standing. She was deliberate in every gesture, speaking rarely but with authority when she did. The townspeople called her the quiet Holloway, yet those close to her whispered that behind her calm eyes lived a restless mind. She spent hours in the library her father had filled with law texts, travel journals, and philosophy, subjects that few women in Jefferson County would dare to touch. Clara, at 20, was her mirror opposite. She moved through the house like a sunbeam, admired for her beauty, adored for her laughter, and forgiven for her impulsiveness. Where Eleanor sought solitude, Clara craved attention. Where one valued restraint, the other lived for the thrill of being seen. The sisters' affection was genuine, yet beneath it ran a current of comparison, a rivalry softened by love but sharpened by expectation. Their father, proud and ambitious, saw his daughters not merely as children but as extensions of his legacy. He dreamed of marriages that would secure his family's position for generations. Invitations to the Holloway home were coveted, not for the dinners or the view from its terrace, but for the opportunity to meet the sisters under their father's approving gaze. What the judge could never imagine was that the daughters he so carefully shaped for society would one day defy every rule that defined it. Beneath their silken composure lay something more dangerous than rebellion, a yearning neither could name, a hunger that no sermon or etiquette could restrain. And it was into this world of polished civility and quiet unrest that a new presence would soon step, one that would expose the fragility of their perfection and test the limits of their loyalty, their morality, and their love. In early April of 1841, a new name appeared in the Holloway estate ledger: Samuel Reed, age 26. The entry, written in the judge's careful hand, noted only his origin, South Carolina, and his assignment, domestic service within the main house. No further comment was offered, no hint of how profoundly his arrival would alter the fragile balance within those white walls. Samuel's presence was felt before it was fully seen. The staff whispered about him long before the sisters ever spoke his name aloud. He was not like the others, they said. He read when he could, spoke softly, and carried himself with the dignity of a man accustomed to thought as much as labor. His literacy was rare, his composure rarer still. To Judge Holloway this made him useful. To the sisters, it made him unforgettable. On his first morning, Eleanor noticed him in the library, dusting the shelves her father kept locked from most servants. She observed how carefully he handled the books, pausing briefly on a volume of Locke's essays on human understanding. When their eyes met, he bowed slightly, not servile but respectful. It was a gesture so simple and yet so deliberate that Eleanor found herself momentarily unable to look away. Clara's encounter came a day later, in the garden where magnolia blossoms lay heavy in the air. She asked his name, though she already knew it, and he replied with quiet steadiness, "Samuel, ma'am." There was a calm in his voice that drew her curiosity as surely as his manner drew her admiration. She lingered longer than propriety allowed. From that week forward, the atmosphere in the Holloway mansion began to shift. Samuel's efficiency pleased the judge, who often summoned him to assist in the library or accompany him to town. Yet when the judge was away, the household followed a different rhythm. The sisters, under the guise of casual conversation, found reasons to cross paths with him, brief moments of exchange that grew longer with each passing day. No one spoke of it, but those who worked in the house felt the change in the air. The Holloway home, once defined by order and silence, now carried a tension both dangerous and unspoken, the first tremor of a story that would soon become a storm. By late spring, the Holloway mansion had begun to breathe differently. The days grew longer, the air heavier, and the boundaries that once held firm within its walls started to blur. Judge Holloway spent more and more time in Atlanta, leaving the estate in the care of his eldest daughter. In his absence, formality gave way to freedom, a subtle but undeniable shift that those within the house felt like a change in weather. Eleanor's journal from that period, preserved in delicate, looping handwriting, offers the first hints of what was stirring beneath the surface. She wrote of her quiet hours in the library and the conversations that soon filled them. Samuel, once a silent figure in the background, had become a companion in thought, a mind she could measure herself against, a voice that challenged her restraint. He spoke of philosophy, of justice, of freedom, ideas that, in that time and place, were dangerous enough to unsettle the foundations of a home like Holloway. Clara noticed the change before anyone else. Her sister's calm demeanor began to soften. She laughed more easily, lingered in the library longer, and seemed distracted even during their morning walks. Curiosity turned quickly to jealousy, though Clara could not have said why. She began to seek Samuel's attention herself, asking trivial questions just to hear him speak. His quiet respect only fueled her fascination. What neither sister admitted, not even to themselves, was that they had both stepped beyond the safety of their roles. For Eleanor, admiration had become something deeper, something she could neither justify nor resist. For Clara, attraction had turned to fixation, a need to possess what her sister seemed to hold. The servants whispered about the sisters' new habits, how Miss Eleanor now requested Samuel's help with her father's books and how Miss Clara insisted he accompany her on errands. They spoke in low voices, knowing that such matters, if heard beyond the estate's boundaries, could destroy the Holloways entirely. By June, the air in the mansion was thick with things unspoken, glances that lingered too long, words left unfinished, and footsteps that hesitated outside closed doors. What had begun as curiosity was becoming something perilous. Love in that house was no longer a virtue. It was a trespass. By July, the Holloway estate had become a place of quiet turbulence. The sun bore down mercilessly, and the air inside the mansion grew thick with tension, a heat that no open window or fluttering fan could dispel. Servants moved carefully through the corridors, aware that a single glance between the sisters could shift the mood of the entire house. Eleanor's journal from that month no longer read like the measured reflections of a scholar. Her words were quicker, uncertain, and edged with emotion. "Clara lingers where I linger," one entry noted. "She watches me when I speak to him, though she pretends not to care. I fear that our affection, once our strength, will become our undoing." In the evenings, Samuel was often sent to the library to tend to the lamps. Sometimes, Eleanor would find an excuse to join him under the pretense of cataloging her father's books. Other times, Clara appeared instead, her laughter too bright for the hush of that room. The line between affection and rivalry thinned with every passing night. Their father remained unaware, or perhaps chose not to see, the growing fracture within his home. He continued his court sessions in Atlanta, sending letters that spoke only of politics and prestige. But within his absence, a quiet rebellion had taken root. Two sisters, bound by blood and duty, had fallen in love with the same man, a man whose very existence in their hearts defied the laws of their world. The confrontation came in fragments: a glare across a supper table, a slammed door, a whisper cut short when footsteps approached. Yet beneath those gestures burned a truth neither could speak. One of them would have to yield, and neither intended to. One evening, under the drooping branches of the willow grove, the sisters faced each other in silence. The humid air held their words before they were spoken. "You forget who we are," Clara said, voice trembling between rage and grief. "No," Eleanor replied softly, "I remember too well." That night the household slept uneasily. Somewhere beyond the lantern's reach, a storm gathered, not in the sky, but within the hearts of those who lived under the Holloway name. And when it broke, nothing on that land would ever be the same again. It was in the first week of August when the fragile balance finally collapsed. The days had turned unbearable, the kind of heat that made tempers short and secrets heavy. Eleanor withdrew further into herself, writing long hours in her journal, her ink smudged by trembling hands. Clara, restless and fevered by jealousy, watched her sister with a bitterness she could no longer contain. One evening the sisters quarreled in the upper hall. Servants heard voices raised, the sound of a chair striking the floor, and then silence. No one dared interfere. When Clara emerged moments later, her face was pale but composed, her eyes bright with something cold and resolved. That same night, by candlelight, she began to write. The letter was addressed to their father in Atlanta. Its words would never be read aloud in polite company, yet they carried the weight of a death sentence. In it, Clara accused Samuel Reed of indecent familiarity with her sister, an accusation that, in the eyes of the law, required no proof beyond her word. She wrote of impropriety, of danger, of protecting her family's honor. What she did not write was her true motive. If she could not have Samuel's affection, then no one would. 3 days later, Judge Holloway arrived without warning, his carriage wheels grinding against the gravel drive. He carried the letter in his hand, the wax seal broken, his expression unreadable. The mansion fell into silence. Samuel was summoned to the study and did not return. Eleanor's journal for that night contains only one line. She has condemned him with ink and envy. Outside, the willow branches stirred without wind. Inside, the sisters avoided each other's gaze, knowing that the letter had set something irreversible in motion. Clara had spoken her lie. Her father had believed it. And Samuel Reed's fate, and theirs, had already begun to unfold in the darkness gathering beneath that house. Judge Nathaniel Holloway returned to his estate that night with the fury of a man who believed his honor had been violated. He said little during supper, though his hands trembled as he folded his napkin. At his order, Samuel Reed was brought before him. The servants recalled the scene in fragments, raised voices, a crash of glass, and the judge's final words before slamming his study door. "He will answer for this by dawn." Samuel was locked in the wine cellar, its air thick with damp stone and fear. The key was kept on the judge's belt as he retired for the night, promising to summon the sheriff at sunrise. The house fell into uneasy silence, broken only by the occasional creak of floorboards and the muffled sobs of Miss Eleanor behind her locked door. Near midnight, Martha Lee, the housemaid, awoke to footsteps on the stairwell, light, deliberate, and unmistakably female. She saw the faint glow of a lantern disappearing down the hall toward the cellar steps. Moments later came the echo of a door opening, then closing again. After that, nothing. When morning came, the household stirred to commotion. Clara was nowhere to be found. The cellar door stood ajar. Inside there was blood, dark stains along the stone floor, a broken lantern, and a razor from the judge's own shaving kit lying beside the steps. Samuel was gone. They found Clara's body at dawn. She lay at the base of the cellar stair, her white gown soaked through, her throat cut cleanly as though by practiced hands. Judge Holloway collapsed to his knees beside her, unable to comprehend what horror had taken place beneath his roof. Eleanor stood in the doorway, silent, her expression unreadable. The servants later recalled that she neither screamed nor wept, she only whispered, "It should not have been her." By midday, search parties rode through the woods and along the riverbanks. Word spread quickly across Jefferson County. The Holloway girl was dead, the accused servant fled. The law would not seek truth, it would seek vengeance. And from that moment, the story ceased to belong to the Holloways alone. It became the county's scandal, its tragedy, and its curse. The days that followed were a blur of mourning and suspicion. The Holloway mansion, once the pride of Jefferson County, had become a place people spoke of only in whispers. The judge's grief quickly hardened into rage. He would not allow doubt to cloud what he believed was justice. Notices were posted throughout the county. A reward for Samuel Reed, accused of the murder of Miss Clara Holloway. Sheriff Dalton Price organized the search, and within hours, armed riders swept across the countryside. They scoured the riverbanks, the abandoned barns, the roads toward Savannah, each man eager to deliver vengeance rather than truth. For in 1841 Georgia, the accusation of a white woman carried more weight than the life of any man in bondage. Eleanor, meanwhile, retreated behind locked doors, refusing food and company. Her journal entries from those days grew frantic and uneven. "I hear his name in every breath of wind," she wrote. "They say he killed her, but I saw no fear in his eyes that night, only sorrow and something that looked like farewell." She never spoke these thoughts aloud. Silence was her only defense. 6 days later, a body was found hanging from an oak near the Savannah River. The sheriff's report declared it to be Samuel Reed, identified only by torn clothing and general likeness. Judge Holloway ordered the matter closed before sunset. The official verdict: murder followed by suicide. The county exhaled in grim satisfaction, eager to bury the scandal with the dead. But in Eleanor's heart, the story was far from over. "They buried a stranger under his name," she wrote. "And I must live with the lie." After the funeral, Eleanor ceased attending church. Neighbors described her as changed, her once serene composure replaced by a distant, haunted silence. At night, she was seen wandering near the willow grove where her sister had been laid to rest. Some said she whispered to the wind as if speaking to someone unseen. Others said she was losing her mind. But those who truly knew her understood. She wasn't speaking to ghosts. She was speaking to her guilt. For more than a century, the events at the Holloway estate lay dormant, sealed in silence and memory, unspoken even among the oldest families of Jefferson County. The mansion passed from one generation to another, its history cleansed of scandal, its tragedies reduced to rumor. The truth, however, waited in the shadows, hidden behind the polished veneer of Southern respectability. In 1964, during the renovation of the county courthouse, a group of workers discovered a false panel built into one of the storage walls. Inside, wrapped in brittle cloth, they found a small leather-bound journal. The pages, fragile and yellowed with time, were written in a graceful feminine hand. On the first page, faded but still legible, read the inscription, H. Holloway Estate, 1841. Historians quickly realized the significance of what they held: the private writings of Eleanor Holloway, long believed to have died without leaving any record of her life. The journal contained fragmented entries, confessions, and reflections that cast the tragedy in a new light. Her words did not accuse Samuel Reed. They mourned him. "I freed him," one passage read. "Or thought I did. When I came to the cellar, the door was already open, the lantern overturned, and she was gone. I heard no cry. I saw only the blood. And I knew in that instant that love had destroyed us all." The final entry, written in a trembling hand, revealed a chilling confession. "He lives. They buried another in his place. He came to me once more and I said nothing. I could not bear the world's judgment, nor my own." The discovery of the journal reignited old questions the county had tried to forget. If Samuel had survived, who had died beneath the oak? And who, in truth, had taken Clara's life that night? No one could answer. But what the journal made clear was this: the story everyone thought they knew was only half told, and the other half was written in shame, love, and silence. 4 years after Eleanor Holloway's journal surfaced, the county commissioned an archaeological survey of the abandoned Holloway estate. The mansion had fallen into disrepair, its columns cracked, its windows clouded with dust, and ivy creeping over the walls like time reclaiming what memory had tried to erase. The researchers expected little more than relics of plantation life. What they uncovered instead deepened the mystery. Half a mile beyond the main house, buried in the overgrowth near the willow grove, they found the remains of a small wooden cabin. The structure had long since collapsed, but fragments of furniture and cookware suggested it had once been a dwelling. Carbon dating placed its occupation between 1841 and the late 1870s, decades after the supposed death of Samuel Reed. Inside the remnants of a rusted tin box, they discovered personal belongings: a pocket knife, a wooden cross, and a folded page torn from a book of philosophy. On the margin of the page, written in faded ink, were 6 words that silenced the excavation team: "I forgive you. Do you forgive yourself?" S. Alongside it lay a small lock of golden hair, tied with a strip of blue ribbon. The historians who studied the artifacts could not help but recall the same color worn by Clara Holloway in her final portrait. The evidence suggested a chilling possibility, that Samuel Reed had not fled across the state or died beneath the oak tree, but had instead lived hidden within the Holloway woods for decades. Perhaps Eleanor knew. Perhaps she kept his secret until her final breath. When the report was published, it closed with one haunting observation: the Holloway story is no longer a tale of murder and scandal alone, but a question of endurance, of love surviving not in sunlight, but in exile and shadow. Time has a way of softening the edges of history, turning crimes into curiosities and tragedies into stories fit for museum tours. Yet some tales refuse to fade. The Holloway case is one of them, not because of its scandal, but because it reminds us how fragile the boundaries are between love and ruin, freedom and captivity, truth and the lies we tell to survive. Eleanor Holloway lived out her remaining years alone in the mansion that had once echoed with laughter. Neighbors called her eccentric, even mad, though none could explain the quiet strength that seemed to anchor her isolation. She never spoke of her sister's death or the man whose name had been erased from record books. But those who passed the estate at dusk sometimes saw her walking toward the willow grove, carrying a lantern and a book clutched to her chest. Some swore they heard her whispering to someone unseen, her words carried by the wind that moved through the trees like a sigh. When Eleanor died in 1873, her will requested she not be buried beside her family but beneath the same willow grove where the tragedy began. No inscription, no marble marker, just earth, grass, and silence. Her final act was neither rebellion nor repentance, but perhaps both. The Holloway story survives not because it offers answers, but because it refuses to. Who killed Claire? Did Samuel live hidden among the trees? Did Eleanor truly free him, or simply condemn them both to a quieter kind of imprisonment? The records end, the journal fades, and the artifacts sit behind glass, but the questions endure. Maybe that's the truest measure of history's ghosts. They are not spirits at all, but unresolved truths that haunt us because they mirror what still lives within us: our longing, our envy, our need to be forgiven. This is the legacy of the Holloway sisters and Samuel Reed, a reminder that the real horror is not in the supernatural, but in the human heart itself. You've been watching Grave of the Shadows. Subscribe if you believe some stories are too human to stay buried, and share your thoughts below. Was this tragedy born from love, or from guilt?